I signed the divorce papers with a smile, then handed him the envelope that would ruin him. He thought I'd break. He never saw me coming. Hey there. Thanks for showing up today. Whatever you're doing right now, folding laundry, commuting, or just taking a moment to breathe, get comfortable. Because the story you're about to hear isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about rebuilding. About a woman who was told she couldn't survive without someone, and proved them all wrong. Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace? Ever swallowed your instincts, thinking maybe it's just you? If so, this story might feel a little too familiar. Stick around till the end to see how Lena Carter turned silence into strategy, and found her power when no one saw it coming. And hey, if this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit subscribe. Your support helps me keep bringing you more stories that matter. Let's get into it.
I used to laugh when Ryan joked about me during his investor dinners. "You know, Lena," he'd say, swirling his whiskey. "She once tried to organize our tax files by color. The IRS would have fainted." Cue polite chuckles, a few head nods. And me, I'd smile like a good wife should. Tuck my chin, sip my Pinot, and pray no one noticed how tight my fingers clutched the wine glass. But the joke that opened the door wasn't about taxes. It happened at a rooftop event downtown, during the launch of his newest wellness tech startup. The sky was soft pink. The crowd was full of young founders in linen blazers and teeth too white to be real. Ryan held court near the bar, basking in his third whiskey and someone else's admiration. "I swear," he said loud enough to pierce the clink of glasses, "if she ever threatens to take half my company, I'll just say she can have the yoga mats and leftover matcha." Everyone laughed. I didn't. That night in the Uber home, he didn't notice the way I stared out the window, or the way I traced the edge of my clutch like a blade. His hand rested lazily on my thigh, still buzzing from the drinks, the validation, the shallow power he wore like cologne. I should have known, but I didn't. Not really. Until a week later, I found a contract draft in our shared Dropbox labeled Restructure Proposal, Carter Labs. And my name was nowhere on it, not even in the footnotes. That's when it began. Not the unraveling. The preparation. Let me backtrack. Ryan Carter wasn't always this way. Or maybe he was, and I just refused to look directly at the cracks. We met during my third year of law school, back when I still believed intelligence was the same as character. He was magnetic, confident, already knee-deep in a venture that hadn't made money but had all the buzzwords lined up like soldiers. Disrupt, decentralize, optimize. He proposed after 8 months, said we were a strategic merger of ambition and empathy. That should have been the first red flag. We got married in the backyard of his parents' estate in Oregon. Peonies, jazz quartet, candlelight hanging from trees like promises. His vows were a TED Talk in disguise. Mine were trembling, full of hope. Year 1 was a blur of pitch meetings and espresso shots. Year 2, he landed funding. Year 3, I stepped back from my clerkship to help with operations just for a little while. That while stretched, like skin under tension. And before I noticed, I wasn't Lena Carter the lawyer. I was Lena Carter, Ryan's wife, answering emails and handling legal fine print for a company I didn't own. "But you're the glue," he'd say, kissing my forehead. I didn't realize glue melts when it's under heat too long. It wasn't abuse. Not in the way people define it. He never raised a hand, never shouted. He just rewrote the room around him. My ideas became his. My schedule bent around his calendar. My voice was welcomed as long as it echoed his tone. One time, I suggested we hire a COO with actual operations experience. He smiled and said, "That's cute, but this isn't law school anymore." Everyone laughed. I did too. But that night, I stared at the ceiling for 3 hours. So when I found the contract, when I saw he was moving assets, preparing to list the company with no mention of me, I didn't confront him. I printed it. 3 copies. Stored one at the bottom of a file marked Pet Vaccinations 2019. Another went to Talia Boone, my best friend since 7th grade, and now a real estate attorney with a poker face built by boardrooms. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a pen and said, "You sure?" I was. Not out of rage, out of reason. Let's say, I told her, that one day he tries to force my hand. I want to have something sharp enough to remind him what mine looks like. We drafted a legal amendment to our prenup, a clause that kicked in only if he moved to dissolve any marital or business partnership without mutual written consent. He wouldn't read it. He never read anything I handed him. So I presented it during his weekly home office marathon, walked in with coffee, kissed his cheek, and said, "Hey, the lawyer needs this updated for our joint holdings in case you want to refile taxes together." He signed. I didn't smile. Then I left to make lasagna. I wasn't planning revenge. I was making room for leverage. Ryan believed in chaos followed by charm. I believed in contracts, in silence, and in timelines. I had all 3 on my side now, and I was just getting started. The hardest part about playing along is pretending you haven't already read the script. After Ryan signed that amendment, I smiled just enough to make it believable. Then I slipped the document into my leather folio, the same one he gave me on our 2nd anniversary, the one engraved with, "To my brilliant wife." Ironic, really. He turned back to his screen, rambling something about scaling user engagement. I nodded, kissed his cheek again, and walked out of his office like I hadn't just shifted the ground beneath his empire. Back in our bedroom, I opened the folio and stared at his signature. It was slanted, slightly messy, rushed like always, and completely legal. I scanned it, uploaded the PDF to a drive only I had access to, then I sent a copy to Talia under our agreed subject line, "Recipe, Lasagna 2.0." She replied 3 minutes later with a thumbs up emoji and a time-stamped legal verification file. I exhaled for the first time that day. But documents weren't enough. I needed behavior. I needed the full arc of his arrogance. And Ryan was all too happy to provide. It started small. He'd leave his phone face down on the counter until he got comfortable again. Then it was screen up, unlocked, notifications pinging like breadcrumbs. I never grabbed it, just took mental snapshots. A text from M, a Venmo charge to a boutique hotel, an Uber receipt at 2 a.m. One night, I asked him how his trip to San Diego went. He didn't even blink. Long meetings, exhausting, didn't sleep. He was tanned, relaxed, wearing cologne I hadn't smelled in months. "Try melatonin next time," I said, placing dinner on the table, "or chamomile." He grunted, "That stuff's for hippies." I smiled. Sure. I didn't eat much that night, just watched him devour roasted chicken I'd seasoned with turmeric and irony. My appetite had been replaced by clarity. Later that week, I bought a black leather notebook. No quotes, no flowers, just pages. It lived inside my nightstand, tucked behind the drawer liner. Each night, I wrote what I'd seen. Date, time, comment. No interpretation, just facts. Left house at 9:42 p.m., said going to gym, returned 12:51 a.m., shirt inside out. Phone buzzed at 11:03 a.m., he smiled, turned it face down. Mentioned cash withdrawals twice this week, avoided eye contact. It felt obsessive at first, like I was becoming the kind of woman I swore I'd never be, paranoid, controlling, always watching. But this wasn't paranoia. This was preservation. I wasn't building a case to hurt him. I was building one to protect myself when he decided to flip the board. And he would. Men like Ryan always think they're playing chess. They forget some women are the board. A month later, he hosted a strategy dinner at our house, just a few board members and their spouses. Ryan asked me to handle the ambiance. That was his way of saying, stay charming, stay quiet. I lit candles, made filet mignon, set the table with his mother's china, and wore the black dress he once said made me look intimidating, but in a good way. He thought that was a compliment. After dessert, while Ryan pontificated about market disruption and audience acquisition, one of the wives pulled me aside near the kitchen. "You're brilliant," she whispered. "He talks about your eye for detail like it's magic." I almost laughed. "Magic's just science people don't bother to understand." She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a lawyer talking." I paused, then nodded. Once. I stayed up after everyone left, alone in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher while Ryan snored on the couch. His phone lit up beside him, another text from M. "Next Thursday, same room, same wine." I didn't flinch. I took a photo, emailed it to my vault, labeled it Shadow Asset 06. It wasn't about catching him. It was about knowing when to strike, if I ever needed to. Knowing I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining the way he reduced me in front of people, then praised me behind closed doors as his secret weapon. I didn't want revenge, but I wasn't interested in being a casualty either. By the end of October, my black notebook was half full. My scans folder had 12 entries. Talia had 3 backup drives in 3 different cities. Ryan still called me sweetheart and texted me emoji hearts. And I replied with the same ones. He thought I was softening, but I wasn't soft. I was silent. There's a difference. The shift was so gradual that even I almost missed it. It started with me changing how I listened, not just hearing his words, but reading the rhythm beneath them, the pauses, the emphasis, the casual cruelty buried in charm. Ryan's voice had become my weather app, predicting storms before they came. He'd toss comments across the kitchen island like breadcrumbs. "You know, if I ever left, you'd probably forget to pay the mortgage." I smiled. "That's true." "You're lucky I'm patient. Most guys wouldn't handle your moods." I smiled again. "So lucky." What he didn't see was that I was cataloging everything. I became a mirror, polished, reflective. I let him see whatever version of me he wanted to believe in, soft, agreeable, impressed. But behind that smile was a log of every time he let his mask slip, and it was slipping more often. There was a Thursday when he came home from a client dinner reeking of hotel-grade shampoo. He wrapped his arms around me and said, "You're always so grounded. That's what I love about you." The words felt rehearsed, like something he'd practiced in someone else's bed. I kissed him lightly on the cheek and asked if he wanted tea. He didn't notice the way my hands shook, because they didn't. I'd moved past shaking. That night, I recorded our conversation. Just a snippet. Him talking too openly about managing perception and how people believe confidence before competence. I labeled the audio file Facade Doctrine. I bought a wall calendar, a pretty one, watercolor print, inspirational quotes at the bottom. On the surface, it tracked yoga classes and grocery runs, but I had my own symbols. A red circle for nights he didn't come home, a blue X for inappropriate comments, a gold star for financial lies I could verify, a green triangle for emotional manipulation he dressed up as jokes. By November, it looked like modern art. Sometimes I'd sit in the sunroom, sipping mint tea, and look at that calendar like it was a map, one that told me exactly where I'd been and what terrain I'd have to cross to get out. And while he thought he was loosening the reins, I was slipping out of the harness. Ryan began to trust my silence. He mistook it for surrender. It made him bolder, sloppier. He once left a rental car receipt on the nightstand, Miami, luxury upgrade, 2 passengers listed. I took a photo, didn't ask questions, didn't even sigh. He was playing offense, but I was playing chess. At a Thanksgiving charity gala, I watched him from across the ballroom. He was laughing with a young blonde woman in a dress 2 sizes too ambitious and eyes locked on his lapel pin. He touched her elbow the way he used to touch mine. I excused myself from my table and walked outside into the November chill. My heels clicked softly on the stone path, the sound of a woman who knows she can walk away at any moment. Later that night, he stumbled into the bedroom, loosened his tie, and said, "God, I hate these events. You're the only good part." I handed him a glass of water. "Drink this." He smiled. "You always know what I need." He had no idea. 2 days later, I created an encrypted folder on my laptop. I labeled it Carter Holiday Plans. Inside, I stored screenshots, receipts, voice memos, photos, calendar scans, even a few private messages forwarded from a source I'll never name. Talia and I met for coffee. We didn't speak about anything directly, just sipped lavender lattes and circled terms in a draft document that would change everything if I ever decided to file first. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "For what?" I asked. "For not reacting." I nodded. Reaction is what he wants. Observation is what he never sees coming. And it was true. By letting him believe I'd become dull, domesticated, harmless, I'd given myself the greatest weapon of all, invisibility. One evening, he found me journaling at the dining table. "What's that?" he asked, stretching, looking smug. "Just notes, for me," I replied. He nodded, like it was cute. "Still doing that self-reflection stuff, huh?" "Yeah," I smiled. "It helps me remember who I am." He kissed my forehead. "Don't go getting too deep. You're perfect as you are." I almost laughed. Because if he really believed that, he never truly knew me. And if he never truly knew me, then he never saw me coming. It happened on a Wednesday. A fire, not literal, but the kind that spreads quietly and smolders underneath everything you thought was secure. Ryan's company was on the edge of launching a new AI-driven health tracker. It was supposed to be the next big thing, the one that would finally land him on some Forbes list he never stopped talking about. But then, 3 days before the press release, a whistleblower leaked internal documents showing their biometric data sourcing was, let's just say, ethically flexible. I found out the same way the rest of the world did, through a frantic push notification at 7:12 a.m. while making coffee. The headline, "Carter Labs faces backlash over data privacy violations. CEO unreachable." I looked up for my phone to see Ryan still asleep on the couch, shirtless, mouth open, phone dead beside him. I didn't wake him. Instead, I poured his coffee, placed it quietly on the table, and stepped into the guest room, which by then had become my part-time war room. The chaos had already begun online. Hashtags, screenshots, user complaints. The board was panicking. Talia texted me an hour later. "If they file for emergency damage control, your clause kicks in." I didn't respond. I knew what that meant. Ryan stumbled into the kitchen around 9, rubbing his face and asking if I'd seen his charger. "I think it's in your office," I said calmly. "Also, your CTO just resigned on LinkedIn." His head snapped toward me. "What?" I slid my phone across the counter. "It's trending." The rest of the day was a blur of calls he didn't answer, voicemails he didn't return, Slack messages pinging so fast I could hear the anxiety through the walls. By evening, he was pacing the kitchen, mumbling half-baked strategies to himself, his voice higher than usual. "I can fix this. I just need to get ahead of it, maybe leak a statement that we were planning to pivot anyway." He trailed off. I stood across from him with a glass of wine, silent. He looked at me, really looked. "You think I deserve this?" I blinked slowly. "I think you deserve to answer for the things you do when you think no one's watching." His mouth tightened. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" I didn't reply. I sipped my wine. By the next morning, his co-founder had deleted all Carter Labs affiliations from his bios. A journalist published excerpts from internal Slack chats. Investors began distancing themselves. Ryan's lawyer, yes, his lawyer, sent a preliminary advisory email suggesting he temporarily step back from public representation. And yet, he still believed he could control the story. That night, he asked me to help him reframe the narrative, said I had a way with words, called me his most valuable brand asset. The same man who once joked I couldn't manage a Wi-Fi password without his help now wanted me to spin his scandal into redemption. So, I sat down at the dining table, opened my laptop, and began typing. I wrote a public letter. Clean, remorseful, sterile enough for PR, but personal enough to feel sincere. He stood behind me, hands on my shoulders, nodding along like a director watching a performance he didn't rehearse. When I finished, he exhaled like he just won something. God, you're good. I know. He went to bed early, exhausted by his own unraveling. I stayed up, rewrote the letter. This time, I added footnotes, timestamps, references. Talia helped me phrase a legal notice to attach, a warning to any news outlet that misrepresented my involvement in the company's operations. Ryan wanted me to be a shield. I became a firewall. 2 days later, while he was at a crisis lunch with what was left of his board, I met with one of his investors, a quiet, older woman named Miranda Cho, who'd always treated me with subtle curiosity at events. We met in a minimalist coffee shop downtown. She ordered black tea. I ordered nothing. I'm not here to ask for anything, I said before she could speak. I'm here to inform you that I hold 49% of Carter Labs shares through a conditional clause signed and notarized on May 6th of last year. Her eyebrows barely moved. That's not public. It's not illegal. She nodded slowly. And you're telling me this why? Because if Ryan implodes, I have the right to invoke stewardship under the joint ownership clause. She stirred her tea. Do you want to? I paused, looked out the window, then back at her. No, but I will if he forces my hand. She leaned back. You'd be better at this than he ever was. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. That night, Ryan came home with sweat on his collar and a defeated slouch in his walk. He poured a drink with shaking hands and collapsed onto the couch. I think I'm losing it all, he muttered. I sat beside him, not touching, not comforting. You built it on sand, I said gently. What did you expect? He didn't respond. But in that moment, I saw it. The first flicker of something he'd never shown me before. Fear. Real, unfiltered, no witness fear. It didn't satisfy me. It didn't make me feel victorious. It just confirmed what I already knew. This was the beginning of the end. And I wasn't going down with him. If there's one thing Ryan Carter still believed he could control, it was a room. Despite the PR disaster still rippling through his company, he insisted on hosting an intimate dinner at our home with the board members who hadn't completely jumped ship. It was meant to be a show of stability, leadership, charm. What it became was a funeral for his illusion of power. He told me 2 days before, no request, just a statement. Keep it classy, Lena, nothing too loud. We need warmth, not headlines. Translation, smile, nod, and wear beige. I wore navy silk instead, sharp cut, no jewelry, just one single pen in my clutch. Talia had helped me prepare every document I needed. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, the one with the polished walnut table and chairs that screamed legacy, even though they were bought on sale from a furniture liquidation outlet. The kind of space Ryan loved to stage himself in, surrounded by decanters, gold-trimmed napkins, and curated humility. I played the part he wrote for me one last time. Candles flickered, wine flowed. He made a toast full of buzzwords and forced optimism. The board nodded politely, exchanging glances over their glasses. His father, Graham, cleared his throat a few times, the way he always did when uncomfortable but too proud to leave. Midway through the main course, Ryan stood up, glass in hand. I want to acknowledge the turbulence of the last few weeks, he said, scanning the room like a politician mid-pivot. But I believe adversity reveals character. And Lena, he looked down at me, has been my compass. He smiled like it was a gift. I tilted my head slightly, the same way I used to in law school when a professor made a legal claim I was about to dismantle. Which is why, he continued, I've asked her to step back from any public association with Carter Labs until we're through this, for her own protection, her peace of mind. There was a moment of silence, a beat too long. I set down my fork, dabbed my lips with the napkin, and stood. Actually, I said, my voice calm and clear, that won't be necessary. Ryan blinked. Because, I continued, reaching into my clutch, the amended ownership documents, signed and notarized last May, grant me the right to intervene in any leadership decision should the CEO compromise the integrity of the company. I placed the document on the table in front of him, flipping it open with quiet precision. He stared at the signature. His signature. The room froze. "What is this?" one board member asked cautiously. "An addendum," I replied, turning the page, "signed willingly, legally binding, includes clauses for misuse of company resources, public defamation, and shareholder protection in the event of executive negligence." Ryan laughed, short, sharp, unconvincing. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You can't just—" "It's filed," I interrupted, looking him straight in the eye. "You handed it to me, literally, along with a cappuccino and a list of KPIs you needed reviewed that week." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Graham, who didn't return his gaze. Across the table, Miranda Cho, the investor I'd met privately, lifted her wine glass ever so slightly. "I reviewed that clause," she said. "It's airtight." A quiet exhale left someone's lips. Maybe mine. I reached into my bag once more and laid down a second envelope. "This," I said, "is a motion to temporarily remove Ryan Carter as acting CEO until a full internal audit is completed. I've gathered support from 51% of the board. The motion will go into effect pending tonight's vote." "You ambushed me?" Ryan said under his breath. "No," I replied. "You built the stage. I just walked onto it with a script you never bothered to read." His voice dropped into that cold register he reserved for gaslighting. "You're doing this because you're hurt, emotional, irrational." I smiled. "Actually, Ryan, this is the most rational I've ever been." The vote happened 30 minutes later. Quiet, almost clinical. 7 yes, 2 abstained, 1 no. His. He stormed out before dessert, slamming the front door with a force that rattled the stemware. Everyone else stayed seated. Graham eventually stood and muttered, "Well, I suppose that's that." He didn't look at me, just picked up his coat and walked into the silence. I stayed behind to clear the dishes. Talia texted while I was stacking plates. "Elegant execution, proud of you." I leaned against the counter for a moment, staring out the window at the darkened street. The wind was picking up. Leaves swirled across the driveway like something had been stirred. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone else to speak first. I had said enough, and for once, everyone heard me. The morning after the vote, the house was too quiet. No podcast echoing from Ryan's office. No blender roaring to life with his morning greens. Just light seeping through the blinds and the kind of silence that didn't feel like absence. It felt like release. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long time, barefoot, my fingers curling into the soft fabric of the blanket. It smelled like eucalyptus. I'd washed it the night before. Somehow, that felt symbolic. When I finally stepped into the hallway, the door to Ryan's office was ajar. His laptop, charger, and desk clutter were gone. The chair sat spun slightly, like someone had stood up too quickly. There was a deep impression in the rug beneath the desk, like years of pressure finally lifting, leaving behind an imprint, but no weight. I closed the door gently. Downstairs, I brewed coffee and called the locksmith. "Emergency or standard change?" the man asked. "Standard," I replied, then paused, "but let's make it fast." He came that afternoon, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes who didn't ask why I wanted all the locks changed, only nodded when I handed him Ryan's keys and said, "Make sure none of these work anymore." When he left, I stood on the porch holding the new key. It felt heavier than the old one. Maybe it was just that this one was mine. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood there, rooted. That night, I moved into the master bedroom, fully. Stripped the bed of the sheets he liked, opened every window, let December wind wash through the space like it was erasing something. The scent of his cologne still lingered faintly in the closet, sharp, expensive, unfeeling. I gathered every trace of him into a box, his cufflinks, the cologne bottle, a few ties, dropped it all off at the donation center. I didn't leave a note. I lit 3 candles on the dresser. Sandalwood, the scent he said gave him headaches. I used to believe him. Now I wondered if he just didn't like how it smelled on me. In the weeks that followed, I began the quiet, deliberate process of reclaiming the life I'd put on pause. I cooked for one. I played music while doing dishes. I left cabinet doors open and didn't apologize for it. I even rearranged the furniture in the living room, moved the couch to face the window instead of the TV. Ryan used to say it was aesthetically disorienting. Now, I liked watching the light change. Talia came over one Friday night with Thai takeout with 3 bottles of wine. She sat cross-legged on my new rug, eyes scanning the house like a silent inspection. "You look taller," she said, sipping her drink. "I'm wearing flats." "No," she smiled. "I mean lighter, like something unbuckled inside you." I didn't argue. By January, the dust from the Carter lab scandal had mostly settled. Ryan had gone quiet. His lawyer had filed a formal transition of executive control. The company didn't fold, but it didn't shine either. It plateaued, like a balloon that stopped climbing but hadn't yet fallen. Some friends sent cautious texts. "He's going through a lot. Hope you're okay." Not taking sides. Others didn't say anything at all. Their silence was louder. But then there were the unexpected messages. A woman I hadn't spoken to since college messaged, "I saw what you did. I wish I'd done the same." An anonymous bouquet arrived at my door with a single note, "About damn time." I smiled. I didn't need to know who sent it. I already did. My sister, Lena, moved in a few weeks later. Temporarily, she said. She brought 2 suitcases, a mismatched mug collection, and a giant ficus tree she insisted had emotional support properties. We fell into a rhythm instantly. Mornings with coffee and NPR, afternoons working from the dining table, her Zoom calls in one ear, my emails in the other, evenings with takeout and debates over what constitutes a classic film. She didn't ask about Ryan unless I brought him up, which I rarely did. One night, she caught me standing in front of the hallway closet, holding a shoebox I hadn't opened in years. "What's that?" she asked. "Our wedding photos," I said quietly. "You want to go through them?" I shook my head. "I want to let them go." She didn't try to stop me. We drove to the donation center the next morning, box in my lap, sun on my face. I handed it over without ceremony, without regret. As we pulled away, I felt something I hadn't in years. Space. Room for something new. Later that evening, I opened a brand new leather journal. Thick ivory pages. No pre-printed quotes. Just blank. Waiting. On the first page, I wrote, "Plans that are only mine. No one gets to sign over them this time. Not with charm, not with control, not even with love." And as I closed the book, I realized something that settled deeper than anger or even relief. I hadn't just removed Ryan from my life, I'd returned to it. The first time I felt her kick, I was barefoot in the kitchen, slicing peaches for a pie I hadn't planned to make. It was a Thursday afternoon in March, and sunlight poured through windows like honey. The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, warm, steady, quiet. I was humming some old Norah Jones tune when it happened, a tiny flutter, low in my belly, like a whisper against skin from the inside out. I froze. Knife still in hand, breath held, palms on the counter. And then it happened again. Not a cramp, not gas, a kick. Small but undeniable, real. And just like that, I dropped the knife, pressed both hands to my stomach, and whispered, "You're really in there, huh?" She didn't answer, of course, but I smiled anyway. Not for show, not for anyone's approval, just because the moment demanded it. I had known I was pregnant for weeks, confirmed by a test, a doctor, and an initial ultrasound. But until that moment, I hadn't truly felt pregnant. I hadn't let myself. Not with everything unraveling, not with legal filings, ownership battles, and headlines with my name tucked behind his like an afterthought. But now it was undeniable. I wasn't carrying an excuse or a complication or a reason to reconsider. I was carrying a daughter, my daughter. I didn't tell Ryan, not because I was hiding it, but because he was no longer relevant to the story. He'd forfeited the right to be the first to know when he tried to script my ending without asking if I'd already begun a new chapter. Instead, I told Elena. She screamed, then cried, then made spaghetti and insisted we name the baby after Stevie Nicks. Later, I told Talia, who offered legal support, a nursery crib recommendation, and a spreadsheet of pediatricians all within network, all in under an hour. And me? I started planning. Not in the frantic, overcompensating way I used to, not with laminated charts and color-coded baby registries, just slowly. Intentionally, like planting bulbs before spring, trusting they'd bloom when the time was right. I painted the nursery sage green, hung tiny string lights along the window, bought a mobile with felt stars that spun slowly like a galaxy in gentle orbit. And every night, I wrote her a letter in that leather journal I now called the Book of Us. Some letters were long, some just a sentence. Some days I wrote, "Today I didn't cry. Today I laughed. That's progress." Other days, "You kicked during a commercial. I think you like music." I didn't talk about Ryan much, but I did promise her this. You will never grow up learning that silence equals safety. You will never wonder if love comes with disclaimers. You will never be punished for having a voice. The house filled with little signs of her long before she arrived. A rattle in a drawer, a giraffe plush by the couch, a half-finished baby blanket that Elena insisted on knitting, even though she kept missing stitches. And the silence? It changed. It wasn't hollow anymore. It was soft, peaceful. Some nights, I'd fall asleep with my hand on my belly, her heartbeat thumping in rhythm with mine. Other nights, I'd stare at the ceiling and whisper, "He said I'd be nothing without him." Then I'd pause and say softly, "But look at us now." Ryan tried reaching out once, months after the boardroom dinner. An email. Subject line, "Let's talk." No greeting, no apology, just 3 lines about restructuring the company, splitting equity, and maybe finding common ground again. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Talia. She replied on my behalf with a legal summary, a custody notice, and a neutral closing statement. He didn't write back. Later that month, a former colleague of his posted a photo of Carter Labs' new leadership team. Ryan wasn't in it. Someone else wore the title now. Someone competent. Someone careful. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. I just closed my laptop, placed my hands on my stomach, and whispered, "One less shadow in the room." By the time Harper was born, I'd become a woman Ryan would never recognize. She arrived on a rainy night in June, loud and pink and furious at the cold. Elena cried. I laughed through tears. The nurse handed her to me and said, "She's strong, got lungs like a siren." I held her close and whispered, "You're safe now. We're safe." And as she nestled into my chest, tiny fingers curled around mine, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of one he'd never be part of. Not because I erased him, but because I stopped needing his permission to write it.
So now that you've heard my story, every twist, every silence, every step I took back to myself, I'd love to hear yours. What did this story make you feel? What part stayed with you long after the words ended? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all and your voices matter here. And if this journey resonated with you, If it reminded you of your own strength or opened a window where a wall used to be, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. There's always another story waiting to be told. Thank you for listening. Truly.